So I see there's some transition happening, so I'll give everybody a minute or two to get settled, although I was told that if I go over, I'm going to be tackled on the stage, so I don't want to start too late. All right. I think we'll get started. So thank you, everybody, for being here and being interested in hearing about the topic of corporate social responsibility. I think many people have probably heard of this topic, and I think it's more commonly being talked about in schools and in the business sector, inside and outside of the sports industry. Some of you may have heard it over the years referred to as cause marketing, community relations, community impact, social impact. I think it has a lot of names. We at the NHL have begun referring to it as corporate social responsibility, really in an attempt to integrate it more with our business. And, oops. Okay, so as you see, the NHL really looks at social responsibility in two ways. And first and foremost, we talk about social responsibility as a platform to do good. If you ever hear Commissioner Bettman talk about CSR or community impact, he'll always say, we do this work because we want to do good, and we do it because it's the right thing to do. And so we always say that first. Secondarily, and probably most relevant for this panel and this audience, is that there's also a way to do good and do good business. And something that we've been focused on at the NHL is really trying to realign our CSR strategy with our business objectives. And there's a lot of reasons that that's important. But the number one reason from my perspective is that it will allow us to do more of that work. We can make the business case for why we need more funding, more headcount, and be able to build more programs so that we can make a greater impact from a social perspective, but also have an impact on our business. So we're going to, today, in the 28 minutes I have left, ultimately talk about a case study looking at the World Cup of Hockey. Many of you may have heard about that. That was an event that we hosted in Toronto in September of 2016, and we'll get to that. But before we get into the case study, I'll just start by orienting you as to what the areas of focus have been at the league from a business perspective. We do a lot of other programs. Some of you may be familiar with Hockey Fights Cancer and other work that we do. But for purposes of this conversation, we're really going to focus on the two areas that really have an impact on our business. So the two areas to highlight are, for these purposes, are sustainability, or our NHL Green program, and we have here the architect of that program, Omar Mitchell. You guys will hear from him tomorrow, and he's here in the audience. And I won't steal his thunder talking about the amazing program that it is, but just to say that sustainability is very relevant to our business. Climate change is something that impacts our game, accessibility to our game, both indoor and outdoor rinks, and therefore our work from a social perspective is directly relevant to our business. Secondarily, and what I'm going to focus on today in the area that I oversee, is diversity. So we work in the diversity area, and from a business perspective, we know that the demographic in our primary markets here in North America, both in Canada and the US, are changing. The typical notions of our population being majority white or majority male historically, or women not having a place from a buying perspective in the household, that are kind of changing and long in the past. We look now to the future and know that the racial and ethnic makeup of North America is going to be diverse, and that people are self-identifying in more than one area. So they might be both black and a woman and LGBT. And so we have to really expand the definition of how we talk about diversity. So from a data perspective, relevant to share that from an environmental standpoint, we have research that shows that our weather and our climate will change by 1 degree. And we know from the research at Wilfrid Laurier University that that will impact the outdoor accessibility of our ice. Many of you know, and for those who have played hockey, outdoor skating is something that is very much associated with the history of our game and very much associated with unstructured activity. And the research shows that for youth playing sports, it's very important that they be able to not just participate in skill development and structured programming, games and practices, but also have an opportunity to just play. Play is really important for skill development as well, and also for retention in the sport, because kids really ultimately just want to have fun. From a diversity perspective, we know that by 2055, the US won't have a single majority from a racial or ethnicity perspective. As you see on the slide, 1 in 7 people living in the US were born in other countries. We know that whether it's immigration or other forms, our country's population is changing. Here's some information about the impact that we've made. And again, I'll kind of gloss over the green work because Omar's going to cover it tomorrow. But we have been a leader in the sports industry and probably beyond in the green sector by issuing the first sustainability report and really trying to measure our impact from a green perspective. From a diversity perspective, I think as we expand the definition of diversity from the NHL's perspective, we know that our sport is actually extremely diverse. We have players currently playing in our league from 19 different countries. And this will be a nice segue into the World Cup of Hockey, where we can talk about how we showcase the global nature of our sport. So the World Cup of Hockey was a tournament that we hosted in September of 2016 in the Toronto area. It featured players from more than 160 NHL players from 14 different countries. There were 8 national teams that competed, and it really emphasized the global nature of our sport. So this was a tournament that was constructed really in partnership between the NHL and NHLPA, which for most of you who follow us and from a labor perspective, was a very unique business proposition. My background is in labor relations, so having negotiated our last 2 collective bargaining agreements, I can say that it was a very unique experience to be partnering in a core business strategy, and also in a lot of ways, I think very good for our labor relationship. In this partnership, as we were constructing our corporate social responsibility strategy, we really looked at what is the impact that this tournament wants to make from a business perspective. Well, we want to raise the level of the game from an international perspective. We want to put ourselves on the radar to show how global our game is. So the focus of our corporate social responsibility strategy was really on profiling that. How can we raise the profile of the diversity of our game, really reshaping how we look at diversity in terms of country of origin. So we decided to look at specifically the city of Toronto. And I don't know if anyone's from Toronto here or Canadian. Anyone from Toronto? Okay, cool. So you guys know that the city of Toronto is one of the most diverse places probably in North America. True? Residents of Toronto, yes? If you go there and you spend time walking around downtown Toronto, you will see people from every background you could possibly imagine. And at least from an anecdotal perspective, I felt as someone who's white in the minority, for sure. 50% of the people in the Toronto population were born outside of Canada. Canada has a very open immigration policy. 250,000 people are anointed to be Canadian as citizens every single year. So with that as the backdrop and all of this data about how diverse a city we were going to be coming to for the World Cup for 17 days, descending on this very diverse city, we thought we really need to look at how we can use the sport of hockey to reach out to new Canadians. There are so many new Canadians in the city of Toronto, and we decided to look at how these new Canadians are integrating into Canadian culture. It's wonderful that many of these new citizens are able to find a home in the country of Canada, and some of them left very tragic situations behind, being refugees and otherwise. How are they integrating into Canadian culture? Do they feel a sense of belonging in Canada? Do they feel accepted? Are they integrating properly? And we think the sport of hockey, particularly because it is designated, actually by statute, as the national sport of Canada. It's actually written in the statute. I always tell my family when I go to Canada that there are actually people playing hockey on the $5 bill. So it's that much a part of Canadian culture. It's in malls, it's everywhere. And for that reason, we thought we have a real opportunity with the World Cup being in the city of Toronto to really showcase the sport and use the sport to help those people to feel more Canadian. What better way to make them feel a part of the culture than to give them access to a sport that they might not otherwise have access to? So we looked at, in partnership with MLSE, the primarily newcomer populations and regions of the Toronto area to say, let's find the data. Let's see if it's really true that these people, number one, have a need from a social perspective of feeling more integrated, and number two, that they actually don't really have access to hockey, but might want to have access to hockey. And the data supported that. MLSE Launchpad is the community project that the Maple Leafs really led, and they commissioned research that obviously shows that less than 4% of these people in these communities where it's primarily newcomer populations were currently playing the sport. 96% of them cited that they had lack of access to the sport. 75%, amazingly, said they would love to actually play the sport. They were actually interested, and they never really thought they would have an opportunity to try for whatever perceptions of barriers that might existed, cost or otherwise. And not related to newcomers, but 100% of Aboriginal youth, which are the First Nations communities who live in Canada, identified hockey as the #1 sport program they would be interested in playing. So we knew from the data that there was a need, and we knew that our sport had an opportunity with the global nature of the World Cup to try to use the World Cup to bring hockey to these communities. So we, most of this we already covered. Just some more information about the populations of people who live in those particular neighborhoods. So we commissioned this legacy project. And we do legacy projects with respect to many of our tentpole events at the league. So when we go to a particular market, whether it's for the Winter Classic or the All-Star Game, we commission a legacy project, which is really a leave behind or a gift to the city that, in our view, makes the city better than it was before we came and leaves our mark with respect to whatever that particular event was. So for these purposes, the World Cup of Hockey Legacy Project was really going to do two things. I should say is going to do two things. Number one, empower new Canadians to make them feel more connected to the community. And number two, give them the opportunity to participate and provide them with the tools to feel connected to the sport so that they might actually be fans. And so again, going back to the premise of CSR, there can be a philanthropic or charitable or social goal and also a business goal. And those goals do not have to be inconsistent or in any way in conflict. They can live together and both support the initiative that you're trying to achieve. So the World Cup of Hockey Legacy Project was commissioned and announced at the World Cup. A couple of background notes, and I'm going to ultimately play a video for you that will give you kind of a wrap-up of it. We brought together key sponsors who were part of the World Cup, who were aligned and had shared values in what we were trying to achieve from a CSR perspective. Those partners were ESPN, Scotiabank, MLSE Launchpad, or the Toronto Maple Leafs, and primarily, most importantly, because this was a World Cup tournament that was not really being commissioned by NHL teams, but rather by international federations, Hockey Canada was a core and integral partner in all of the work that we were doing in the community. Obviously, Hockey Canada is the governing body for hockey in Canada, and we really wanted to set the stage and set the model that when we are doing the World Cup, we expect the host federation in Canada to really take a leadership role in carrying out whatever our legacy is going to be in the community. So we brought together all of these sponsors and we devised this strategy for this legacy project to bring hockey to new Canadians. And as we were brainstorming about how we're going to announce this in a very unique way, we had the idea that we could do so in the context of a citizenship ceremony. Has anyone here ever been to a citizenship ceremony? Just a couple of people. this was my first citizenship ceremony, but people who have attended, and I now know having attended it, it's one of the most emotional and amazing experiences to have. You really feel the power that being aligned with a new community has for people who are newcomers and immigrants. So due to the nature of Canada's open immigration policy and the fact that these citizenship ceremonies happen often, we thought, what better way to announce this project, which is going to bring the sport of hockey to new Canadians, than to do it in the context of a citizenship ceremony. So we worked with the government in Canada, and we hosted 103 Canadian newcomers to take the oath of citizenship with the World Cup of Hockey as a backdrop as the hosts. And we did that at our fan village and had the commissioner and Don Fear, the executive director of the NHLPA, announce this project in partnership. One other point of note, which I think is what really made this feel big and amplified and special, was that fortuitously we were able to have Daniel Alfredson, who's the longtime Ottawa Senators captain, take the oath with the 102 other new Canadians who became new Canadians that day. That many people have said, how did you make that happen? It's a long process. He happened to be in the process of applying for citizenship and was able to just align his date with the World Cup, having no idea that this was ever going to happen for him. He would have probably otherwise been in a courtroom with nobody watching him and his wife take the citizenship oath. So the stars were aligned for Daniel Alfredson to really be there in the context of the World Cup. He was also working for Team Sweden at the World Cup, but taking the Canadian oath. You'll see in the video that I'm about to show you what was super interesting about it was that he told us in advance that he felt so aligned with his home country that he was going to feel conflicted about putting on a Team Canada jersey. And particularly because later that day, his team was playing on the ice. So he, from a competitive standpoint, said, I really need to stay aligned with my team that I'm working for, my national team. And so he said, at the moment when everyone puts on their jerseys and we take a photo, I hope it's okay if I don't do that. And we said, of course, you can do whatever you want. You'll see in the video that he was so emotionally moved by the experience that he went ahead and put on his jersey and actually stood right at the front of the formation that we did with all of the new Canadians who took their oath that day. So I'm going to go ahead and play what I think is about a 3-minute video, which will show you the announcement of the Legacy Project, and then we can go on and talk about some of the other work we did at the World Cup.
Welcome to the Citizenship Ceremony. I'm Ron McLean, and it's a huge honor to be here today.
What I see this event today is really building citizenship through hockey. And this is about bringing new citizens to Canada, but also using hockey as the cultural fabric. And so I think what NHL does, and specifically this as it relates to their Legacy Project, is to be able to be sustainable as well. So you don't come in and just do one thing and it's over. What the NHL and Hockey Canada, MLSE, the Players Association has been able to put together is a 4-year plan that says we're going to keep doing this. We're going to earn the right to be at the table, to be a good community citizen, and actually transactionally make things happen. That's the beauty of it.
Our hope is that we can make an imprint on the community. We can have an effect on new Canadians coming in. We can make it a little easier for a little more people to become exposed to and learn the game.
MLSE and MLSE Foundation are proud to be legacy recipients of the World Cup of Hockey programs. We are building a 42,000 square foot facility. We're also donating a great sports pad to the town of Scarborough. And we'll do that now through a great newcomers program thanks to funding from the World Cup of Hockey, ESPN, NHL, and NHLPA.
We will support Hockey Canada's Community Caravan, which will travel to schools and community centers and will provide an introduction to a variety of hockey-based activities. And we will take the Scotiabank sports pad that is being used here at Scotiabank World Cup of Hockey Fan Village and donate it to Scarborough Village, providing a space to play and learn ball hockey for some 6,000 area youth.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour à tous.
Today is a great opportunity to welcome 100 new Canadians to their citizenship and to have them feel a part of Canada from the outset by making them feel a part of hockey.
That I will be faithful and bear true allegiance.
A citizenship ceremony is one of the most important and easily one of the most significant events that takes place in the life of anyone that moves to a new country.
It was a special day, and it was an honor to say the oath and to have them repeat it back. It was emotional, you know, to watch them come up and to get their certificates and just how proud they all were. It was really a privilege to be part of it.
We wanted the World Cup to be about bringing the world together, and what better way to do it than to be involved with 100 people becoming citizens of a new home, a great country, and we're excited for them.
Daniel Alfredson. Birgitta Alfredson.
It's a big day. My wife and I are here today along with our children to take the citizenship oath and become Canadian citizens. It's a unique situation, becoming a citizen of a second country. I think we're extremely fortunate and lucky to be citizen of a country like Canada. What brought me to Canada, it was hockey. You know, to be able to do this here today during the World Cup, probably the best hockey tournament in the world, it means a lot.
I still get goosebumps when I watch that video, so it was really exciting to be part of that. So as you heard in the video, there were really three components to the Legacy project. The first that I'll talk about is the sport pad. So this was the actual sport rink that was used at the World Cup Fan Village, and we had that donated to a community in need that is primarily inhabited by new Canadians in the Scarborough community. We anticipate that approximately 6,000 local youths will be using that sport pad on a regular basis. The second is the Hockey Canada Community Caravan. This is actually a World Cup van, truck, that has within it all the things that you would need to play the sport of hockey, not on the ice, but on land. And we are bringing that caravan all across the GTA. So that's going to schools, community centers, churches, temples, community events, and we expect that that community caravan over the next 4 years will reach approximately 10,000 kids. The third aspect is the MLSE Launchpad, which is based in the Moss Park region of Toronto. And that's a facility that actually opened last month. And the facility is going to have sport programming in a variety of different areas. One of them is hockey, and that's the program that we are funding. So that hockey program is really going deep in terms of the type of access it's giving. It's going to be a 10-month program for 90 kids each year that are going to have access on a regular basis to the sport of hockey. So getting to the point of what you guys are all here studying, which is data and the impact that data can have on the efficacy of your work, how are we going to measure the impact of all of that work? Well, we have these three different projects that are going to be going on simultaneously, and they're very different in how they're executing their strategy. So we intend to collect information over the next 4 years of these projects that are funded for, and analyze that data as to which of the programs actually have a greater impact. So you have the community caravan with Hockey Canada that's giving kids, a lot of kids, a very narrow exposure, so maybe a 1 or a 2 time experience. What does that do for the kid? And for them, we're going to be tracking how the project impacts them in their life and whether they actually ultimately sign up to play the sport. Is a 1-time exposure enough to help them to see that they can play it? And on the flip side, we have the MLSE Launchpad, which is giving kids a very sustained program, a 10-month program, obviously a much smaller number of kids, but how does that impact their ability to continue to play? And so we're going to be collecting, as you see, both quantitative and qualitative metrics, looking at how many people we're reaching, what the demographics of those individuals are, how does it, do they actually stay within the sport? What's the retention rate? And look more broadly from a local hockey perspective, how the numbers may be impacted by bringing this much more diverse population into the broader numbers in the GTA through Hockey Canada. From a qualitative perspective, there's a lot that just can't be measured necessarily with straight numbers, and we really want to get anecdotally information from these individuals about how they feel, how it impacts them to be participating in the sport. Do they feel more of a sense of belonging? Do they feel more connected to their community? One of the individuals who we've been partnering with, Harnarayan Singh, who's a broadcaster on Hockey Night in Canada, Punjabi, tells the story about how, for him as a youth, that the social grease for him in being accepted into his community in Calgary was actually the fact that he had hockey knowledge. He felt growing up as a young boy that being Punjabi, he really felt out of place and had a hard time, whether it was his own perception or the reaction he was getting from other people or a combination of the two, he had a problem feeling accepted. But once he was introduced to the sport of hockey, he felt that that was his social grease. That gave him credibility in the community and among his friends. He actually went on to obviously have a very successful career, and he's now building the Hockey Night in Canada broadcast in Punjabi. He actually came to the World Cup and did some speaking engagements for us because his narrative is really brings to life the exact objectives of what our legacy project was about. So just a couple of other points of note, and I only have a few minutes left, and I want to leave a couple of minutes for questions. We did other stuff at the World Cup, which I didn't cover today as part of the legacy project, but just as a point of note in terms of a well-rounded CSR strategy, we also wanted to bring in and expose a lot of children who might not have otherwise had access to the World Cup. And so we hosted educational events where we brought in approximately 12,000 kids through education programs into the World Cup experience. And we hosted various events with those kids, mostly around STEM programming. And we also hosted 2 days of intellectual conversations on diversity and inclusion, sustainability, and youth hockey, and really brought together a global audience to have those discussions, both from an audience perspective and a panelist perspective. And I guess the last thing I wanted to show is that our hope with CSR over time is that this will help to really engage, because it really is such a great narrative from an emotional perspective for fans in social media. And so we did a quick analysis, and really I think the point of note here is that the conversations that relate to CSR are positive. They tend to really elicit that emotional connection to the sport and leave a lasting impact that we think ultimately, and we'll want to demonstrate this from a business perspective, creates ties and deeper connection to the sport that will ultimately get them more engaged to play, to come to games, to consume our sport, to purchase merchandise, but also just to feel that hockey is serving them in their life and providing the platform for them to learn those values that transcend the game. So I have 2 minutes left. I'm sorry I didn't leave a lot of time for questions. That's my email address in case anybody wants to reach me. I'm already out of business cards from this morning. So I'm happy to take any questions now in the next 2 minutes, or if anybody wants to reach out to me by email, that's fine too. Any questions? Yeah, so for those who couldn't hear him, it's a good question. How did the league and the team CSR programs interrelate, essentially? So all of our teams, now 31 teams, run their own CSR programs, and they all have their own community relations people. From a league perspective, it's our job to provide broad and wide-ranging league initiatives that the teams can buy into. And what we do is message out to our teams. For example, with Hockey's for Everyone last month, we messaged out to our teams, hey, we're going to be running a campaign for Hockey is for Everyone. Here are the ways that you can activate. Here are some best practices. Here are some ideas for you. aggregate that information for the teams, disseminate it out so that they have the tools to be able to be successful in their market, and also see the value in engaging in a league initiative. So we're going to support you on NHL Social. We're going to do articles about the programs you're running on NHL.com. We're going to talk about your work on NHL Network. And so with the power that we have from a communication standpoint, it incentivizes the teams to want to participate in our programs. That's not to say that they don't do their own programs as well, and we think it's great that they do those programs. We just might not amplify that message. From our perspective, the best programs for us to amplify are the ones that are league-wide, and we're constantly fielding information and sourcing information from the teams about the things that are important to them and their priorities to ensure that our league-wide umbrella programs that we run really reach the masses of our teams so that they want to buy in. So currently, our CSR league-wide programs are Hockey is for Everyone, which is diversity, inclusion, and equality, NHL Green, which is our sustainability program, and Hockey Fights Cancer. And those are always being evaluated to ensure that they're catering to our clients. Really, the teams are like our clients. Any other questions with 20 seconds? So we have our head of international strategy who's going to be speaking on a panel, I think, in 10 minutes. So he'll probably give an answer to that question. But what I'll say is there's a lot of synergy with the Hockey is for Everyone program internationally. And what we saw with our campaign that we ran last month is that we reached and engaged communities way beyond the traditional hockey countries that you might think of. So the country of Kenya, without our prompting, saw our campaign and issued a video on Twitter that was really talking about the impact that hockey has had in that country. And so I think with the way we're expanding the lens of diversity, we'll reach those other countries naturally, and hopefully it will ultimately align with our international strategy. So I'm out of time. I don't want to be tackled off the stage. So thank you, everybody, for your time. Have a great conference.